Murdaugh has just been sentenced to 40 years on federal financial crimes. The convicted murderer took a plea deal and admitted to stealing millions of dollars from his clients.
You take this gun or any gun like it and blow your son's brains out on June 7th or any day or any time.
Convicted murderer Alex Murdaugh is sentenced to another 40 years in prison for stealing millions of dollars from his legal clients.
The story around Alex Murdaugh's trial was indeed a shocking one, as the case led to more new discoveries that even investigators couldn't understand. In addition to the killings attributed to him, he was also given a longer prison term for allegedly robbing his previous clients of their money. What do you know about the case in South Carolina? Join us as we unveil the mystery behind this case. The trial. On June 7, 2021, American former lawyer Alex Murdaugh was on trial for the murders of his wife, Maggie, and their 22-year-old son, Paul. Beginning on January 25, 2023, the trial in the South Carolina Circuit Court's 14th Circuit concluded on March 2nd, when all 4 counts were found guilty. In the meantime, Murdaugh, who had entered a not guilty plea, was given 2 consecutive life terms without the chance of release. Attorneys representing Murdaugh submitted a notice of appeal, but the new judge rejected the request for a fresh trial. Local media, however, referred to the trial as the trial of the century in South Carolina. They described it as arguably one of the most high-profile and sensational cases in South Carolina legal history. Before we delve deeper into this case, let's get to know the man behind the crime. A brief history of Alex Murdaugh. Alex came from a well-known legal family in the South Carolina Lowcountry, the Murdaughs. His father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were among the 3 generations of his family who worked as 14th Judicial Circuit solicitors for 87 years. Nonetheless, the elected post is in charge of all local prosecutions. As a result of their history as prosecutors, the family became known for its strength and capacity for influence. Murdaugh followed the family's lead and went into law. He practiced law at the legal firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich, P.Empt, and in the prosecutor's office in the area. Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., launched the company in 1910. Murdaugh moved to their expansive Moselle property in neighboring Islandton after living in Hampton, South Carolina. The complex, which spanned around 1,700 acres, included the dog kennels, a cottage, sections of swampland, and the Murdaugh residence. The South Carolina Supreme Court disbarred Murdaugh in July 2022 because of his legal issues. 99 other criminal counts unrelated to the murders remained against him. How can a lawyer have so many criminal records? That doesn't add up, but keep watching to discover how it all happened. State prosecutors have charged Murdaugh with embezzling more than $8.7 million from clients of his legal practice and other people through fraudulent schemes. Not only that, but among the possible victims included in the state grand jury indictments are relatives of Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh's housekeeper who passed away in a trip and fall incident at the Murdaugh residence in 2018. The family settled with the PMP Ed Company in 2021, according to Charleston, South Carolina's Live 5 News. But one would think fraud schemes were the only crime Alex ever committed. However, his next crime took another sinister turn. 3 months after Paul and Maggie were killed in September 2021, Alex Murdaugh is said to have plotted to pay Curtis Eddie Smith to kill him to give his surviving son, Buster Murdaugh, the opportunity to inherit a $10 million insurance jackpot. Alex first claimed he was the victim of a drive-by gunshot, but as his tale fell apart, he admitted to being the mastermind. Following Murdaugh's arrest in 2021, attorney Richard Harpootlian disclosed that his client had had an opioid addiction for 20 years. During the murder trial, Murdaugh also acknowledged this. The wife of Alex Murdaugh, Margaret Kennedy Branstetter, better known as Maggie Murda, graduated in 1991 from the University of South Carolina, where she also met Alex Murdaugh. She was a member of the Kappa Delta sorority. After their wedding on August 14, 1993, the couple went on to have 2 boys, Paul and Buster. Nevertheless, she was seen as a committed mother and worked as a housewife full-time. Maggie and Alex Murdaugh shared their time between Edisto Beach, South Carolina, and the Moselle Hunting Lodge after selling their Hampton, South Carolina home before the killings took place. Maggie tragically died at the family's Moselle estate on June 7, 2021, at the age of 5 after being shot with a rifle.
Maggie and Paul.
Maggie is her name?
Yes, ma'am. And please hurry.
6 weeks before the killings, in September 2021, Maggie had a meeting with a divorce attorney. Marion Proctor, Maggie Murdaugh's sister, also testified before the jury on February 14th. During her testimony, she stated that in the weeks following Maggie and Paul's killings, Alex Murdaugh never talked about identifying the assassin. Proctor claimed that the rest of the family was constantly terrified of the unidentified murderer. Who was Paul Murdaugh? The younger son of Alex and Maggie Murdaugh, Paul, was an undergraduate at the University of South Carolina. Paul, referred to by his father as Paw Paw, was compassionate and curious, according to family and friends. He was incredibly attentive to his aging grandparents, but according to Morgan Dowdy, his ex-girlfriend, Paul had aggressive tendencies occasionally. Paul had previously gained notoriety as the probable driver of the boat that claimed the life of 19-year-old Mallory Beach in a deadly accident in Beaufort County, South Carolina, in 2019. There were 6 people on Alex Murdaugh's boat at the time of the disaster. 4 other people on the ship testified that Murdaugh became angry and fought with his ex-girlfriend. He went back to the boat's helm and accelerated. Documents show that before the ship beached, it struck a tower and the front of a bridge. After being tossed overboard, Beach Mallory died from drowning and blunt force damage to the head, according to an autopsy. Moreover, earlier that evening, Paul had purchased alcohol at a nearby petrol station using his older brother's identification. According to the tests he had, at the time of the collision, his blood alcohol content was over 0.28, which is more than 3 times the legal limit for operating a motor vehicle. Paul was charged with causing severe bodily harm, operating a boat while intoxicated, and causing death in the collision. At his arraignment, he entered a not guilty plea, but because of his murder, he was not fit to stand trial on any of the accusations, the death of mother and son. Maggie received a call from Alex in June 2021 asking her to meet him at the Murdaugh family lodge. From there, he intended for them to travel together to see his dying father, Randolph Murdaugh III. Conversely, Maggie texted a friend to complain that Alex seemed fishy and was up to something. She discovered her son Paul dead on the ground when she arrived at the dog kennels after parking her car at the residence. When Alex discovered his wife, Maggie, who was 52 years old, and their 22-year-old younger son, Paul, dead, he called the police from his cell phone at 10:06 p.m. at the family's hunting lodge in Islandton, South Carolina.
This is Alex Murda at 4147 Moselle Road.
Is he moving at all, your son? I know you said that she was shot, but what about your son?
Nobody. They're not. Neither one of them's moving.
The bodies were found close to the dog kennels. They'd all been shot several times in the head, wrists, and chest, using various weapons. Murdaugh stated that he was with his dementia-stricken mother at the time of the killings. Still, evidence from cell phones, including voice-activated video, showed he was there before their deaths. Investigation of the case. It was made public in October 2021 that Alex had been considered a person of interest in the killings by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SELED, from the beginning of the inquiry. Throughout the trial, Dick Harpootlian, Murdaugh's defense lawyer, harshly criticized the probe. Rain sadly ruined the crime scene, and it has been stated that the police neglected to gather evidence and let friends and family browse the area. The arrest and indictment of Mr. Alex. Mr. Alex Murdaugh was taken into custody in July 2022, following the issuance of an indictment by the Colleton County Grand Jury. The indictment included 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of possessing a weapon while committing a violent crime about the deaths of Murdaugh's wife, Maggie, and son Paul. However, the indictment said that Alex used a shotgun on his son and a rifle on his wife. Murdaugh entered a not guilty plea, and the prosecution said that they would not seek the death sentence, but rather life in prison without the prospect of release. Murdaugh's trial reportedly started on January 25, 2023, at the Colleton County Courthouse in Walterboro, South Carolina, with the judge giving instructions and the prosecution and defense making opening remarks. Clifton Newman managed the cases, although Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin handled Murdaugh's legal representation. The lead prosecutor for the state grand jury, Creighton Waters, oversaw the team that brought charges against Murdaugh. The Attorney General of South Carolina brought in John Meters, a veteran of numerous murder trials, to assist with the prosecution. Defending attorneys say the prosecution should not inquire about Murdaugh's financial offenses. Nevertheless, the court dismissed their arguments and declared he would make a formal ruling on Thursday, February 2, 2023. On Thursday, February 2nd, the judge dismissed the jury early so the prosecution could call 2 witnesses to testify in chambers regarding Murdaugh's financial offenses. Furthermore, the court stated that before deciding whether or not to allow these witnesses to appear in front of the jury, he wanted to hear additional testimony in private. Judge Newman declared on February 6th that the testimony regarding Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes was admissible, allowing jurors to assess whether Murdaugh's financial predicament was a motive for the killings. This decision came after many days of hearing arguments without the jury present. Is his wife's death related to his financial situation? Regarding his son, though, what can be said? What offense did he commit? Additionally, Newman claimed that when defense attorneys asked a witness to hypothesize about a potential reason why Murdaugh might have committed the killings, they had opened the door to testimony regarding the alleged financial crimes. In the meantime, the court had to adjourn for many hours on February 8th due to a bomb threat. Judge Newman said on February 13th that 2 jurors who tested positive for COVID-19 had been removed from the jury and substituted with alternates. Murdaugh was charged a second time on February 24th for passing contraband in the courtroom. The jurors went to the murder scene at the request of the defense. Testimonies. First responders to the site following Murdaugh's 911 call were among the first witnesses for the prosecution. The prosecution requested that the judge force a Snapchat official to testify on a video that Paul Murdaugh uploaded just before he passed away. In an interview with Murdaugh in a car on June 21, 2021, the prosecution called SLED witnesses to testify regarding firearms and ballistics. During the interview, Murdaugh said of his kid, "It's just so bad. I really did him a huge favor," X told the jurors. The defense team also contested whether "I" or "they" was said on the recording. The prosecution called an expert witness to discuss the information that Maggie's phone had collected.
Traumatic picture that he saw of Paul and Maggie, what did he say?
It's just so bad. I did him so bad.
I did him so bad.
Yes, sir.
2 of Paul Murdaugh's close acquaintances were called by the prosecution to speak about their contacts with the Murdaugh family and their conversations with Paul just before he passed away. On the other hand, a witness claimed to have heard Alex's voice on a video that Paul had made just minutes before the prosecution believed the killings occurred. The reason for the murders, according to the prosecution, was stress brought on by the knowledge that Murdaugh had committed financial crimes. They called former co-workers and clients of the defendant to testify about the defendant's financial status shortly before the killings took place. They also summoned a local bank's CEO to testify regarding the bank's discovery of Murdaugh's theft. Prosecutors also called pathologists and criminologists expert witnesses. They summoned a SLED agent to testify on a timeline of events for June 7th that combined all of the information gathered from many sources, including the defendant's and victims' cell phones, automobile telemetry data, and cell phone tower pings. On February 17th, the prosecution rested its case following the testimony of all the witnesses and charges against the defendant. The defense attorneys called their first witness as soon as the prosecution concluded its case. They contacted the Colleton County coroner, who confirmed that the recorded time of death was an approximation and that they had simply assessed the victim's body temperatures. Buster, the defendant's surviving son, was summoned to the stand by the defense on February 21st. A crime scene engineer was one of the expert witnesses called by the defense, who set up the crime scene and contended that the defendant's height did not match the shooter's estimated height. But what does height have to do with shooting? He did kill them, didn't he? In his testimony, a different expert witness expressed his opinion that first responders did not treat the crime scene appropriately. On February 23rd, Murdaugh testified in court. He denied that he had shot his son and wife.
Did you take this gun or any gun like it and blow your son's brains out on June 7th or any day or any time?
No, I did not.
Murdaugh acknowledged that he was audible on a video his son recorded at the kennels at 8:44 p.m. Before reporting that he discovered the deaths at the kennels later that evening, Murdaugh repeatedly admitted lying to police enforcement about whether he had been at the kennels on the night of the killings. He later explained his statements as paranoid thinking, stemming from his opiate addiction.
Why did you lie?
As my addiction evolved over time, I would get in these situations or circumstances where I would get paranoid.
In addition, he acknowledged ordering a cousin to shoot him and admitting to stealing from his firm and legal clients.
Did you continue lying after that night? Did you not?
But once I lied, I continued to lie. Yes, sir.
Does he think he could escape the law by paying someone to shoot him too? I don't think so. On the same day, the prosecution's cross-examination got underway. Murdaugh concluded his testimony the following day, and Judge Newman immediately dismissed the jury. A pathologist retained by the defense team testified that the state's pathologist had misidentified Paul's body's entrance and exit wounds. Tim Palmbach, a specialist in blood-stain spatter analysis, was also called in by the defense. Additionally, Palmbach has provided testimony in well-known situations, like Michael Peterson's trial. In addition, Palmbach indicated in his testimony that he thought there would have been gunshot and blood residue on the shooter, and that the evidence pointed to the presence of two shooters. John Marvin Murdaugh, the defendant's brother, was the final witness called by the defense. Judge Newman refused the defense's request for a directed verdict after the defense rested its case on February 27th. Following the defense's conclusion of their case, the prosecution declared they would address the defense's points. The prosecution called witnesses to start their rebuttal case on February 28th. They had called 4 witnesses, 4 of whom had already testified. Murdaugh's police chief was also called to testify. The last witness was a crime scene specialist who had been summoned earlier. Alan Wilson, the Attorney General of South Carolina, performed the direct examination. On February 28th, the prosecution concluded their counter case. Closing arguments, verdict, and sentencing. On March 2nd, Judge Newman declared that he had received notice that a juror had deliberated over the material that was put out. Closing statements started on March 1st. Due to her inappropriate behavior, the juror was discharged and an alternate took her place. Attorney Crichton Waters made the closing arguments for the state, and Attorney Jim Griffin represented the defense. Nevertheless, Attorney John Meters made the state's response and closing argument. On March 2nd, the jury was charged and deliberations started. Less than 3 hours later, on March 2nd, 2023, the jury found Murdaugh guilty of 2 counts of murder and 2 charges of having a weapon while committing a violent felony. The decision was aired live across the United States on major broadcast and cable news networks due to the high level of public interest in the case. After the verdict was read, Judge Newman rejected the defense's request for a mistrial, stating, "The evidence of guilt is overwhelming." He told the jurors, "The circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, all of the evidence pointed to one conclusion, and that's the conclusion that you all reached." The jury had arrived at a proper conclusion as they saw the law and facts, which Newman would later clarify. In particular, on March 3, 2023, at 10:08 a.m., Murdaugh was found guilty of 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of release. Following his sentencing, Murdaugh spent roughly 45 days being assessed at the Kirkland Correctional Institution in Northwest Columbia, South Carolina, to determine which maximum security prison he would be placed in. Prosecutors conducted a press conference following the verdict. The day following sentencing, the defense fielded questions from the media and declared they would appeal the decision. A few days following the sentencing, Randy, the elder brother of Murdaugh, expressed in an interview that he thought his brother had withheld certain information concerning the deaths. The South Carolina Court of Appeals received a notice of appeal from Murdaugh's counsel on March 9th. A federal grand jury issued an indictment on 22 counts for money laundering, wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, according to a May 24th announcement from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of South Carolina. Murdaugh entered a guilty plea to all 22 state charges included in the indictment on November 17, 2023. In connection with the state's criminal indictments, he was sentenced to 27 years on November 29, 2023. He was charged not just by the state, but also by the federal government. Following the introduction of evidence of additional crimes on April 1, 2024, a federal court sentenced Murdaugh to 40 years in federal prison for his financial fraud crimes. This sentence was to run concurrently with his prior sentences for murder and state financial crimes. Additionally, Murdaugh was ordered to pay reparations totaling $8.7 million to the victims of his crimes, including the family of his former housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. Attorneys for Murdaugh declared they had enough evidence to file for a fresh murder trial on September 3, 2023. Murdaugh attorneys Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin accused Colleton County Clerk of Court Rebecca Hill of interfering with the jury at a press conference on September 5th. Meanwhile, Hill later published a book on the case titled Behind the Doors of Justice: The Murdaugh Murders. To date, no one can tell the real motive behind Alex Murdaugh's actions or why he killed his wife and son. What do you think could be his reasons? And why was he begging to be killed as well? You can drop your comment down below. And don't forget to check out any of our videos on your screen now for more cases like this.